removed.
Okay, let me ask you a crazy question. So who has more power and influence? UK or the entire Jewish community?
What, the entire Jewish community in the UK?
No, worldwide.
Oh, worldwide.
Yeah.
Well, and the British government, I'd have thought. I mean, if you take out the Israeli government, because they've got all the benefits of a state, but sure, I mean, the British government is
who is
fifth largest economy in the world.
So fifth largest economy in the world. So who? Okay, because this is where it kind of takes me. You know how in the Middle East, Iran had, the Shah of Iran, and they used to call him the puppet of the West, right? Mm-hmm. Until they realized he's a big boy now. He's no longer a puppet. Mm-hmm. You can't control him. And he became his own man. Then when he did, they found a way to get a guy who was living in France.
When you say they found a guy?
Whoever the establishment may be, whether it's US, UK, they found a guy that is living in France, Khomeini. Khomeini goes to Iran. The Shah falls.
Sure.
Iran's been a mess for 45 years since the fall.
But that wasn't Britain and France. Or that wasn't America and France that did that.
I didn't say no. He lived in France.
He lived in France. And very unwisely, the French authorities allowed him to fly to Tehran. That, by the way, is one of the flights I most wish had never taken off.
Yeah, you and I both. But where I'm going with it is, did that happen intentionally because they were getting too scared of Iran becoming too powerful and they wanted to kind of, cause a fall? And this was their way of saying, here you go. Kind of like, go to Russia, right? The argument that is made where when the Tsar, Nicholas II, he's in Russia, he has the power, generation, family, can't be controlled. You can't tell him what to do. He wasn't a puppet of anybody. But then, hey, maybe Lenin could be a puppet. So let's bring the Bolshevik and some of the arguments that are made.
What? Who makes that argument?
But hear me out with the argument. I'm making here for you. This is where I'm trying to go with this. Who in the right mind think this is a good argument to have this happen to EU? Who would allow so many migrants coming into EU for it to lose its identity? On what Richter scale, on what argument is that a good idea? Like even the financial guys, the money guys, Wall Street. A lot of times you say, who has the most power in the world, right? Well, it's really, billionaires. Okay. It's really the virtual governments. Okay. It's really the presidents. Presidents? All right, maybe. But let's go to the guys that have the money, who everybody criticizes, that gets to buy people. Go to the people of money. Why would they let this happen to you?
Well, first of all, I think we might have a disagreement of the history of the Shah's fall and of, indeed, the Romanovs' fall. I don't think anyone orchestrated that, as it were. Revolutions happen. Just like I said, I wish that the plane had not...
You don't think anybody was involved in the fall of Iran?
No, hang on.
The UK is a powerhouse, not a pawn. As the world's fifth largest economy, it wields immense power on the global stage. This fact alone demolishes the insidious notion that some shadowy cabal controls world events. The interviewer's attempt to draw parallels between the fall of the Shah in Iran and supposed puppet governments is a classic example of the kind of simplistic, conspiracy-laden thinking that's poisoning our discourse.
Just as I said that I wish that the plane had not taken off from Paris with Khomeini on it and landed safely, I wish that the train had not left the Finland station carrying Lenin. It was a very big mistake to allow Lenin, obviously, to get back to Russia. Mm-hmm. A historic mistake. I mean, there is always a simple explanation of history, which is that somebody is guiding it. And I don't, generally speaking, I don't believe that. I might, just as a historian, having written about very complicated events in the past, my observation is, would that there were a guiding hand that was able to do everything, but that there isn't. In fact, I don't want there to be, but there just isn't. There is no one force that's capable of doing something like that. The Romanovs had problems that have been growing for 2 centuries at least. The Shah had problems that have been growing for decades. And then they meet the revolutionary force of somebody as evil as Lenin or Khomeini. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I mean, both of these men were, they were death forces, but they were forces of nature. extraordinary evil men, but they had followings and they could get people to follow them and they could do these terrible things and turn over a whole country and a civilization. They were able to do that. I don't think that happened because of anyone in Washington, D.C. or, I mean...
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, there's always an argument about Mossadegh earlier on. But no, I mean, I think it's consoling to people. I think there's a consolation to thinking that when these things happen, they happen because somebody, always in the West, by the way, orchestrated that to happen. I think it's a thing of consolation. For instance, if the Western countries wanted endless access to Iranian oil supplies, wasn't a good idea to let Khomeini in. If people thought that the Romanovs were a problem, who on earth would have thought the Bolsheviks were the solution? Churchill famously said that this was like allowing a bacillus to be released in the society. But going back to what you asked about Europe, again, I mean, when you say where power resides, I mean, power resides in lots of different places, and it oscillates. Sometimes a parliament, for instance, has a lot of power. Sometimes a single member of parliament has a lot of power. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the parliament doesn't have power. Sometimes, like in the age of social media has power and overtakes the power of politicians, and politicians have to cower from the social media. At other times, it's the other way around. Social media companies can be very vulnerable to legislation from government. So there's never a fixed... I don't think there's ever a fixed...
that's a naive way of thinking?
Well, obviously, I don't think my own way of thinking is naive.
Well, listen, I'm having this conversation with you because I'm curious to know how you process this part, because logically, none of this makes sense.
Murray's shattering illusions. History isn't a puppet show. It's chaos incarnate. Romanovs, Shah, Lenin, Khomeini, all victims and villains of their own making. Power's not fixed. It's a wild dance between parliaments, individuals, and social media. Remember Egypt 2011? Facebook toppled a 30-year regime. Murray's challenging us to face the messy truth. Are we brave enough, or will we cling to comforting lies?
Let me go back to when you're saying, do you believe there's such a thing as an establishment, a anti-establishment? Do you believe there's such a thing as, the groups of people of money and power behind closed doors that, are the puppet masters who feel they can control and influence elections, societies, countries, wars?
I think it's a low resolution way of thinking. Very low resolution.
Unpack that for me.
I think that, again, it comes down to the nature of the world being extremely complex always, much more complex in this era where we get insight into things we would never have got insight into before. The ability on our devices to find out information we would never have been allowed to find out before, and to hear opinions we could never have heard before. There is, in my view, a temptation. There are many temptations in this era, but one of them is to see specific guiding hands in certain places, because it is a consolation to us to help us through what otherwise looks like something too close to chaos. Mm-hmm. So let me just take one of the words you use, establishment. Do I believe there is an establishment? No. There are lots of establishments. Lots. There are financial establishments, for sure. There are political establishments, for sure. There's a Democrat establishment. There's a Republican establishment. There are different establishments within each of these parties.
What I'm talking
but the
about.
idea, no, but when you say an establishment, I want to which one, what? Who are we talking about? Do we think that Donald Trump and Bill Clinton get together with Bill Gates and agree on anything? No.
No, I don't think that's the community. But you think about in a company, take a $50 billion company, right? You could be a director and doing the work, and you're doing your part. Then you could have VPs that are newer VPs that have come, they're hungry, they're doing their things, right? Then you got C-suite executives that have been with the company for 28 years. Quite frankly, they don't want to freaking work anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've worked with a company called AIG, and I did business with them for many years. Great experience, loved it. But the more and more I got in, the more I realized there was an establishment C-suite executives that they didn't want to work as hard as the others, but They had been around so much and they knew the dead bodies everywhere that they knew how to control some people to scare the shit out of them to say, hey, man, if you talk about that to anybody, you're going to hurt me. And because of that, I'm going to make sure you XYZ said about you. And the establishment of executives in a company, much smaller, have a lot of control for that company to expand. So you'll see a lot of big companies getting smaller because of the establishment C-suites at the top who have been around for 30 years that no longer want the startups to grow. They no longer want to hear about the shit about dreams and what if one day and imagine one day and I want to move up the corporate ladder. I want to one day be the CTO, the CEO. Oh, be quiet already, dude. Let me just freaking go golf 3 days a week. That is the establishment of a company filled with executives that can prevent this company from growing. This is why new companies come out, startups, and they destroy the establishment because the established C-suite executives. That's what I mean as the establishment in a smaller scale.
But that C-suite establishment,
been around.
There are many ways to look at it. But
Murray's obliterating the myth of a single puppet master. It's chaos, not control. We've got more info than ever, yet cling to lazy narratives. Establishments, they're everywhere, not just one. Remember 2016? Trump bulldozed the Republican elite. Corporate executives stifle innovation, strangling growth. Murray's urging us to see reality in HD, not blurry conspiracies. Are we ready to face the truth?
There are at least two ways to see it, which is one, maybe that C-suite establishment does exist, and it does in lots of companies. It can. And also, maybe they're very vulnerable. And I can think of lots of cases where the people who, as you say, are basically checked out are very vulnerable. They may know where
the bodies are buried,
and so on, but that doesn't protect you for all time. Or they're at the top of the C-suite in their company, but then the whole company is eaten by somebody else who comes along. I mean, you must have seen that plenty of times as well.
Of course, but that happens because of the establishment. So that's the point I'm trying to make to you is, for example, in Congress, okay, we don't have term limits in America. New guy comes out, he says, I want to be a congressman, and I want to make some change. And he goes in. Oh, shit. That guy just scared the crap out of me. I don't care. I'm going to stand up to him and her. Nancy doesn't scare me. Chuck doesn't scare me. McConnell doesn't scare me. Oh, my God, I just lost and I didn't get reelected. Hey, I'm so sorry.
Well, but again, that can happen, and the opposite can happen.
It does happen, though. It's not about it can happen. It does happen.
Let's say it does happen. The
establishment does do that and control it. So all I'm saying is, where I'm going with this is the following. Do some people in the establishment, okay?
I don't like this use of the word the establishment.
Well, I'll use it. You can use a different word for it. I'll use it. Do some people who are the establishments who are using their tenure for being around and they know where the body's buried, can they sometimes make some decisions that they think is the right decision that end up destroying what they once built or what they once helped grow? Can they negatively impact a society, a country, a company?
Before I answer that, I want to ask you a question.
Please.
Do you think you're establishment?
I don't think I'm establishment. I'll explain to you why I don't think I'm establishment. I'll give you my who I was. My background.
I know your background. I'm thinking, but where you are now, why aren't you establishment?
I'm not at all part of the establishment. I don't take money from anybody.
But I
don't take sponsorship.
Sure. Okay.
I don't have to. Now, hear me out. Let me tell you this. So I got a call from a guy. So, and I won't give the name, but you know who this guy is. Maybe you would know who this guy is. In the game of agents, managers, representatives, he's at the top. Okay. So, hey, listen, if there is ever an interest in wanting to have us represent in the sale or in the partnership of the podcast being with XYZ company to get 100 million here, a couple 100 million here, whatever it is, you got to kind of be careful to not have those types of guests on anymore. I got this call. I'm just telling you, I got this call.
Sure. Okay.
Here's how the call went. I said, here's the difference. I'm a self-made guy. I made my own money. I came up, had a 1.8 GPA. I don't have a 4-year. I don't have a 2-year. I'm an Army guy. I love numbers. I'm very good with numbers, and I love people. I got into financial services. Somehow, some way, in the insurance industry, they couldn't stand me because I was not a golfer. I'm in insurance industry. I've golfed 18 holes in my life, maybe 5 times. I can't stand golf. I'm not that guy.
In utter agreement.
Okay, I'm not that guy. I don't have the patience for golf, so I will caddy.
Douglas Murray and Patrick Bet-David are debating power structures. Murray argues there's no single establishment, but many competing groups. Bet-David claims insiders can manipulate things behind the scenes. They discuss this in business and politics. Bet-David insists he's outside the system, citing his unconventional background. The core question is, who really holds power? And can anyone even truly be anti-establishment?
For you, and we can have a nice cigar, but I'm not going to sit there and golf with you. That's not me. So nothing about my profile of being in the financial industry was the ideal guy. Then there is disruption. Then we have market share. Then we grow. Now we have enemies. Behind closed doors, I'm losing insurance carriers. I'm losing contracts. They're playing games. The guys that have been around for 30 years who have a nice, sweet little business don't like a guy like me coming in. They're making my life a living hell, and I'm still not caving at them. And then eventually we sold the business. And then I came to start my own company now. We're media, consulting, all the stuff that we're doing. Yesterday we had an event, Palm Beach Convention Center. We had nearly 6,000 people in the room. We had Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and people showing up from 100 plus countries, executives, founders, private equity guys, VCs. And they're coming in, and we're not sitting there saying, hey, I owe this guy, better do this, or else that guy, this guy. I don't do well with that. So all I'm saying is, you asked me the question, I'm giving you the establishment side. I sit there and I think about who the hell, even with the people that have the money, the only way this could be happening is because somebody's allowing for this to happen. Somebody at the top has to be allowing for this to happen because they think it may be a good idea, or there's a deceptive idea, reasoning behind it.
Okay, let me, first of all, to say again, when it comes to your own example, I can imagine somebody, as with me, accusing you of being part of an establishment.
An establishment.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Not the establishment, because what I'm saying is I don't think that there is the establishment.
I think there is.
In a country. I think there are establishments.
No, but I think...
And I know, by the way, what people say about it is, oh my God, he's covering up for the establishment. I just don't, as I say, I think that there are different establishments and different gatekeepers in different industries, and you just described your experience with one. But it'd be perfectly possible if I was a guy who was down on his luck somewhere in the US and I wasn't on the ladder yet and I wasn't doing so well, I might well look at your CV and think, oh, he's part of the establishment. Or an establishment, at least.
An establishment is different than the establishment.
No, but again, somebody could easily say, end up pushing you that way. My point is, I don't think that the parameters on this.
If you're trying to teach me English, you're right. If you go on the English route to say, here's the.
Well, I'm going the logic route, too.
No, it's not the logic route. Where I'm going with it is different than the exact definition. Yes, this is our building. This is our establishment. It is. Yes, this is our restaurant. It's my establishment. Yes, this is our comedy club. It's our establishment. Yes. But the establishment is behind closed doors.
No, but I'm saying you have power of some kind. If we're going to play that game, then you have power.
No, not at that level, though. You're talking about...
No, well, of course, there are different levels of power and different levels of influence. Right. What I'm saying is that, and you gave the example of pre-revolutionary Iran, pre-revolutionary Russia, the Romanovs seemed to have all the power. They were the establishment. Turned out it didn't do them any good.
You don't think U.S., Kissinger, UK... MI6, CIA had a role in causing the Shah to fall and not send help when he needed it, when the revolution is happening, when Kissinger promised him he would? You don't think anybody played a role in causing the fall?
Mean, we can get into the. I mean, look, I think that you will probably know your history of '79 better than me, although you were also not. How old were you in '79?
I was born in '78, but I was born in. I lived there 11 years, 10 and a half years. Yeah.
Bet-David's bragging about being a rebel in finance, pissing off the old guard. He's throwing mega events with The Rock for Pete's sake, but Murray's calling BS, saying Bet-David might be the establishment to some poor schmuck. They're even dragging in the Iranian Revolution. Is it people power or puppet masters? Like the 2008 financial crisis, was it greedy bankers or government policies? Nothing's black and white.
And of course, in Iran is, of course, one of the countries in the world that, if you're British, is most flattering, because the Iranians still think the British run the world. It's very nice for Britain.
Well, you did for Iran for many years. You had British Petroleum, you had the oil, the whole contract.
Sure. But there's always been a lot of belief in the sort of hidden hand of the power of the Brits. To this day, a lot of the Iranian press still suggests that America is only doing what Britain tells it to do. Again, deeply flattering to anyone who's British, but not true. I don't think that... what I'm trying to get to is, no, I do not think there is an establishment in the West that is capable of doing the things that you suggest.
Who is capable of causing mayhem? which establishment is capable of causing mayhem in EU that is not just this whole thing happened accidentally.
Again, I just resist a sort of low-resolution analysis of what is a very complex and potentially lethal problem. I would love it if it was the case, and I've had so many people who've tried to argue this to me since Strange Death came out. I'd love it if it was the case that there was a document from the establishment in the EU that explained its border policies in the last 60 years, let's say. There just isn't. I'll tell you what I think has happened. Very, very straightforward human explanation. The borders started to open after the Second World War. They invited in what were called guest workers, the Gastarbeiter program in Germany, mainly people from Turkey. They asked them in, invited them in, because there was a need to reconstruct Europe after the war. There was an assumption, Angela Merkel herself said this in 2010, there was an assumption that the migrants would go home after they'd arrived. There was every mistake possible was made, but, and in retrospect, we just say, how the hell did they make this mistake? I mean, who could have guessed that a Turkish man moving to Hamburg, Berlin, might want to meet a nice woman, and if he met a nice woman, might want to have nice children, and if he had nice children, might want a nice house and a nice salary and so on, and might not want to go back to Turkey. And that's one of the better countries that people enter Europe from. They didn't see it coming. They didn't predict that. And they slowly, as the decades went on, lost control. And every single time, as a famous politician in the UK said, every single time somebody inherited office, they saw all of these problems they were inheriting, and they could see the problem was getting worse and worse and worse. And they knew that they were less and less capable of dealing with it. And they knew that they should leave it for their successors because this was too difficult to deal with today.
Murray's dropping truth bombs about Iran, thinking Britain's still pulling the world's strings. Talk about living in the past. He's calling BS on this all-powerful Western establishment crap. Europe's immigration mess. It's not some evil master plan. It's a colossal screw-up. Post-World War II, Europe's like, hey, come rebuild our ship, to Turkish workers. But surprise, surprise, people want families, homes, and a decent life. Who knew? Sometimes the world's not run by evil geniuses, just short-sighted idiots.
Now tell me that when we come to the case of the US, something similar isn't happening. What has been the story of illegal migration in recent decades? Always the push to say, look, we're not going to be able, and this is from Reagan, and this is from everyone, the dreamers. Why was this framed as the dreamers? Because always it is, look, we've lost control of the border. Yeah. Millions of people have come in illegally. Nobody has controlled it. It wasn't that Dr. Kissinger or Hillary Clinton or anyone else wanted this to be the case. Although there are some politicians, I should say, who do like the idea of utter chaos, and we can come back to that if you want. But every single time it was, these people are in our country already. What do you want to do? Keep them in the black market? Keep them working illegally? Keep them in this shadowy shadow economy? Or should we just say every, 10 years amnesty? It's so much easier to do the latter. If we were sitting here and we were talking about amnesty, and you say, why not get these people into the legal job market? And why not let's get them paying taxes? And the easiest thing in the world is to say, you know, that makes sense. Yeah, let's get them into the economy. Of course, the harder one, the restrictionist argument, is every time you do the amnesty, you give the thumbs up to another X million people to cross the southern border. Look, it's just easier for them. It is much easier for them than, to go back to the example I gave from Italy, putting 1 million people on buses and trains and sending them back to North Africa, and from North Africa to every country they've come from. This is just so much bigger than the idea that there's somebody who wants it to happen and that's why it happened.
Douglas Murray's message is clear. Amnesty fuels chaos, inviting more illegal immigration. Since 1986, over 6 million have received amnesty, yet illegal numbers soared to 11.4 million by 2018. This costs taxpayers $116 billion annually. Meanwhile, big corporations profit from cheap labor, leaving Americans to foot the bill. It's time to enforce our laws and secure our borders before it's too late.
Okay, so you wrote a book titled The Madness of Crowds, right? You got gender, race, and identity. We may differ here, but that's the part of conversation. There's the risk of me being wrong, you being right, and vice versa, or neither one of us being either one of them. An audience sits there and agrees with you or with me. Who do you think is more influential? The loud, screaming, crying, complaining crowd, the mob, or in my case, you're not going to like this word, but I'm going to use the word, and you can, define it any way you want, and you can say it's an elementary, but a powerful minority of folks who are working behind closed doors to keep control and influence around the world. Meaning, you got two guys, right? Say you're a governor, you're a Speaker of the House, you're a senator, you're a president. What's more scary for you? Is it 10,000 of us marching in the streets saying, you're the worst leader, you're an you're an Islamophobe, you're a horrible human being, this guy doesn't deserve to be in office? Does that have more power? Or the guy from the top and says, hey, Douglas, here's what we need you to do tomorrow. You're going to get in front of the crowd. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. Or else you're not going to get funded for your reelection. Nothing's going to happen to you. Who do you think has more power?
It would depend absolutely each time and always on the circumstance. Absolutely each and every time. Look, sometimes the crowd breaks through. Sometimes it fails to break through. Sometimes, if there is anyone in the position you describe, sometimes there are people who have power. Sometimes you can, one of the interesting things we've learned in America in recent years is, sometimes you can pull a lever and it turns out nothing happens. There are lots of situations where the person who is assumed to have power feels effectively powerless. I mean, one of the reasons I am not as I say, low resolution, there is a explanation for everything, there's always a person or a document and so on, or a secret tape, is because my experience of watching politicians and others in many countries is I'm always struck by the extent to which they feel incapable of doing things. Because there are things in the system, and again, left and right, you see the same thing. Things in the system that just don't work, things that are broken, things that are meant to do one thing and do another. But when you get to the points, as you say, where the crowd can break through, who knows? We have lived in recent years through several big things in America where the crowd got damn close to breaking through, and sometimes did.
Douglas Murray argues that power is situational and elusive, with both the crowd and elite influencing change. He highlights systemic failures like the 2008 financial crash, showing leaders often feel constrained. Recent events, such as Black Lives Matter, demonstrate public dissent's potential impact. Murray emphasizes the need for perseverance in seeking change, questioning whether we can break free from systemic constraints or remain manipulated by unseen forces.